Hey guys, welcome back. It's kind of been a while, but this is our first kill of Durumu, the Forgotten, and I don't know, just one thing I have to say about Durumu is he's hard. I'm sorry if that puts any dirty thoughts in your heads, but it's true. He's probably the hardest boss that we had clearing normal mode. On the second thoughts, though, after looking over the fight, that might not have been due to the difficulty of the fight, but rather us trying to maybe not obey mechanics entirely and some of the graphic card problems this was causing. But I'll get to that when we get to that. The first thing you'll notice is he's casting this thing. You'll see my boss timer in the middle of my screen called Hard Stair. What this basically does is it debuffs the tank. Every time a tank takes a hard stare, they get smacked in the face by this pretty nasty hit, and then they take 10% less healing, so it's a Mortal Strike effect, and that stacks. The other thing this does is it puts a little bleed effect on them called Arterial Cut, and what this does is it just keeps hemorrhaging out damage for them, it's physical damage, until they are topped off with healing. So, as a healer, it's really important to precast a big heal right before that goes out, especially once your tank is up at about the 2-3 stack range and onward. Also, if you're a tank at about the 3-4 stack range, you want to start rolling your biggest cooldowns, like the big 3-minute cooldowns that you have. And then what you want to do is you want to switch off, you want to switch tanks right before this phase starts. Now what this phase is doing is you can see it shoots out these 3 different colored beams. The easiest one to work with is the blue one. Right before these all pick a target, the targets that it's going to be landing on, each of the beams will light up and you'll see a line drawn to you. And then you'll also see these points flickering around the room. If you have the blue and you see a blue point in the room, you can't be standing in front of it. If you stand on the blue dot, which will turn into an ad, and you have the blue beam, you'll pretty much wipe the raid. If you have the yellow beam, what it does is it focuses on you at first, but then it just starts slowly moving around the room, out of your control. You kind of want to just keep standing in it. You need at least 2 people in it, and what we did is we had the off tank standing in the yellow beam, the tank who has all like 4 or 5 stacks of the Mortal Strike debuff from before. Now the hardest roll is the red beam. If you get the red beam, you have to run around the room and it follows you. So what this means is you need to run closer to the center of the room because that will minimize the distance that you have to move because it's a cone, right? So the closer you are to the boss and running in a circle, the faster you can move your beam around. But you don't want to overshoot the ads. Now when you get picked for the red beam, you'll see 3 little dots on the ground. The way we handled this for organization's sake is we had people kind of trying to stand in between these pre-assigned raid markers in the room, and then those people would call out and vent if they saw a red dot on their side of the room, and then that way the person that gets picked for the red dot knows exactly where to go. It's really important to bum rush this phase. We found it easier to heal this fight, and the faster you can get these red ads down, the better. But you need to be really precise. If you get picked for the red beam, you need to quickly direct it to the ad, and when you put the beam on the ad, it reveals it, and then you need to blow that ad up, and you need to do that 3 times. There's 3 ads. Okay, what we're doing now is the part of the fight that actually caused a few of us some graphical problems. A lot of us that have newer cards still didn't see this drawn correctly, and I'm included in this. If you can see on my screen right now, it's really difficult for me to discern the difference between the overhead cloud, which is like the stuff that won't hurt, and the little tiny, more broken apart bits of purple cloud. That's the thing that will hurt and insta-kill you. And I'm running, just personally, I can say this, a 460 GTX NVIDIA card. That we have a raider that was running below the 400 graphics card, and he still gets driver crashes during this fight, and there's nothing we can do about it. We have tried fiddling with it in every angle we can. We have some professional expertise in our raid directing us on what we can do to fix it, and we still couldn't get it to stop crashing. So Blizzard's acknowledged that this is a problem. If it's happening to you, our strategy was just save that battle res for him. Okay, now here's the beam phase again. It basically goes beam phase and purple phase and beam phase and purple phase. I got picked for the red, so you get to see, luckily, how the red is done. I basically stand here, reveal an ad. If I were to move off of the ad, it would blow up the raid, just like if you had the blue and moved it off the raid. You can also see here that it's okay to stack on top of the beams. Like if you have different colored beams stacked on top of one another, it's okay to do that because what's going on with these beams is if you're standing in them, you're quickly getting this debuff that increases the damage taken from standing in the beam. So if you're overlapping them, you're putting more bodies into it and you're actually taking less raid damage overall. And this is where you want to use your 3-minute healing cooldowns during this phase. But even though the raid is taking massive damage, you can see here the tanks come first as a priority. If you neglect them like I did for 2 seconds, they drop. So it's really important to stay on those tanks. The other things you don't have to worry about, this little thing he's putting out now, this purple beam blast, basically just don't stand in it. And these little purple puddles are coming from when we get picked by this ability called Lingering Gaze. So if you get picked for Lingering Gaze, just make sure to run to the back of the room and try to drop the puddles out there. As you can see, we have one in melee, and that makes it really difficult because what these puddles do is they damage you, and they also put a slow if you're running through them, which is a real pain in the ass when you're doing the maze part, which is when the whole room fills up with purple. I'll go over that as this comes up again, the purple phase. But the other mechanic we're juggling here is a life drain. A player will get debuffed with this thing called Life Drain, and what it does is it starts increasing in stacks on them per second as they stand in it, and it starts healing him for the amount of damage they're taking. So what you need to do is you have to, in a 10-man, you need to have a person take 2 stacks and switch to another person, needs to stand right in front of them and take 2 stacks, and then another person stands in front of them. You really can't control moving once you're actually being drained because it stuns you and you just take damage. So you really need to be quick and organized about that. Also make sure to have a Mortal Strike debuff on the boss so he doesn't heal up as much. Okay, so here's some extra notes about this purple phase. As you can see here, he does this thing called the precast, which is where he sticks his beam out, and in heroic mode, this is where an ice wall would spawn, but in normal mode, he just sticks out this beam, and then you'll see those little light tendril-looking things on the ground, and then the purple will start on either the left or right side of those tendrils. Those tendrils is the safe spot to stand, and then the whole room will slowly fill up with purple, and then 3 spots will appear. One will always be in melee, one about 20 yards out, and then one at the edge of the room. The edge of the room is too much movement. Even if you're ranged, you have to continually move if you're out there. So maybe if you're a hunter or a healer, that's okay to stand out there, but for our raid group, we're a 10-man, we can't spare people not doing DPS on the move, so we all stand either in the melee range, or if you're ranged, you have the luxury of standing in that middle lane that's open. Basically, if you stand there, there will be 3 open spots, and right as that last little cone fills up the room, you'll see the 3 spots appear, and you need to move out of that purple if it's under your feet right away. Like, if you take more than 1 or 2 ticks, you're probably going to die, and I spirit shelled it to kind of give us a little bit of extra cheese for bad latency. But basically, once you're on the move, you need to look ahead. If you run too far ahead, you're going to die, of course, from standing in the purple. But there's a beam that's coming up from behind you that's slowly just moving around the room. If you get clipped by that, it's an instant death. But the biggest advice I can give to you is don't freak out and run ahead because you think you're going to get clipped by the beam. It's actually really generous to stand in that beam as it's following you around the room. It's like really generous to stand right in front of it. And if you're in melee range especially, you really don't have to move that much or far or fast to beat the beam catching up with you and like cutting you in half and stuff. So yeah, that's my advice for the maze, is just don't freak out, like take your time going through it. On the precast, just make sure to get in that white tendril area, see which part of the room is filling up and see which direction the purple is filling up around the room. It'll either go clockwise or counterclockwise, and we call out in vent which direction it's going, and then try to stand where you think that open clear spot is going to spawn. I've heard that some people can see like the 3 spots definitively before they spawn, but in my raid and after looking at this video and other videos, I can't seem to figure out where those 3 open spots are. But if your graphics card is showing you 3 safe spots to stand, more power to you. And other than that, on these beam phases, this is pretty much where you blow all the cooldowns. As you can see here, our raid just wiped. That's what happens when you overshoot an ad. If you're shining a beam on an ad and then you move out of it, that big explosion happens and pretty much kills you all. So we just barely steal a kill there. And like I said, this is one of the more difficult fights. Good news though, if you do clear this, the next like several until the very last boss are actually pretty easy. So good luck and have fun.